Hello and welcome to Art and Self. I'm Cindy Ingram, your host and the founder of Art Class Curator, the Curated Connections Library, and the Art and Self Connection Circle. This is a podcast where we experience the range and depth of what it means to be human, seen through our connections and conversations about works of art. These art conversations are here to show you that art is here for you as a catalyst, a challenger, a coach, and a comfort. Before we get started, take a moment to fill up your lungs with a deep breath. Connect with your body and your mind and your spirit, and get ready to discover what art has to show you. All right, I am so very thrilled to welcome Josh Kreitzman to the podcast. Hi, Josh. Welcome.
Hi.
So before we get started, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. My name is Josh Kreitzman. I am living in New York, Long Island. Have been married for about 21 years. I have two wonderful children, girls, or women, as they say, 14 and 11. So we're getting to those teenage years. Currently, I am a certified public accountant. So I run my own firm here in New York. Preparing taxes, saving lots of people money, doing lots of fun things with that. But prior to that life, I actually don't have a bachelor's degree in accounting or business. My bachelor's degree is in theater. And I've always been a big fan of art and the arts, and being creative is like one of my outlets in any way, shape, or form. I currently play in a band, a rock band that plays mostly 90s. My 90s rock, so Counting Crows, Jim Blossoms, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, and I also love Broadway musicals. It's like my jam. So
Awesome.
I've just always been a big fan of singing and a big fan of music and art, and so I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you asking me to do this.
Yeah, I'm excited too, and I did not know you were in a band. So that's cool. Have you always been in a band and we just never talked about it?
No, I haven't always
Or
been in
has
a
it been
band.
new?
It's
Is
been
it
the last few
newish?
years.
Few years?
What's that?
I was just like, yeah, it's the last few
Yeah,
years.
yeah. So I think it started in like 2017 or
Oh,
16,
okay.
something like that. And but I was never really I was in like one small band in high school. We played for a couple of weeks. That was about it. And then I
Yeah,
didn't play with anyone. And now here I am. But it started out
that's
just as a
awesome.
couple of people just jamming and having a good time. And now we play every couple of months at bars and stuff on Long Island. And
I love
it's
it.
turned into a lot of fun. We're actually playing tomorrow night. And, but I
Nice.
don't want to say the date because it's a podcast. I want it to live forever. I don't want to like date myself. So.
Yeah, and tomorrow night they won't have heard this yet because it won't go live yet.
Right,
So,
exactly.
well, I guess I've always noticed the guitars behind you. So, well, I'm excited because Josh is my tax guy, but also we talk about musicals, and I just think that is such a delight that we get to talk about musicals. And so when I was thinking about the art for you, I could not shake the idea in my head that we had to talk about like musical moments, like a particular song in a musical. And like do the same thing that we do on the podcast with art and interpret it and talk about what it means to us and where we find ourselves in it and all of that, but do that with a musical song instead of a painting. So, or a
Yeah,
work of
that's
art.
exciting. I'm
Yeah.
totally down for that. I mean, the musical is the true American art form. It's
Yeah.
was born and bred here. I'm proud to have been a small part, a minuscule stardust particle part of any sort of musical.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a blast. I love it.
Sweet.
Musicals are the
Okay.
greatest. I don't understand people who don't like them.
I don't either. It's shocking. So, I have half of my household is not a big fan, but thankfully I've converted one of my daughters.
I don't
And
understand how you can't like musicals. They're the best thing ever. You're I have people who tell me they think they're dumb. And how you just break into song and dance, it makes no sense. And it's like, what doesn't make sense also? Like Star Wars, if you think about it. I mean, you love Star Wars, but that doesn't make
yeah,
sense. I mean, come on. None of it
yeah,
makes sense. It's just entertainment.
yeah.
And I don't understand why. I can't understand people who are like, they're stupid. And I'm like, well, you need to suspend some sort of disbelief, because haven't you ever had one of those moments in life where you just were so emotional about something that you couldn't do anything but sing about it? And
Yeah.
whether it was a sad song or a happy song, or you get into your car and that the music plays and you get that frustration out. And I mean, we
Yeah.
do it in life all the time. I mean, so I don't see why people would say they don't like musicals. So if you're one of those people that say they don't like musicals, you should give them another chance.
Yeah. I was like, this isn't the episode for you. Or maybe this is. Maybe we will convince you
That's
through
right.
our fascinating discussion about one of these songs I've chosen. So I had a list of a good 15 songs at one point, and then I was narrow it down, and then I would forget one, and like Hadestown isn't in here, and I'm devastated because I'm just like, I love Hadestown, but like I couldn't find the right exact song. But anyway,
I'll tell
okay.
you the best. So my favorite song in Hadestown, I'm not super familiar with the show, but when I heard Why Do We Build the Wall,
Oh,
that song to me is just so heartbreakingly moving. And you don't even know what it's about in the beginning, because the lyric is, why do we build the wall? We build the wall to keep us free. And they do all the great lyrics, but then the twist of it is they're actually building the wall to keep out poverty. And that's what keeps us free. And it's
yeah.
all of these things that we're dealing with now, today, that,
Yeah.
and this song was written 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's all of these lists of things that, why are we building this wall? Well, we're building the wall to keep people out, because that's what keeps us rich, and that's what keeps us free, and that's what keeps us who we are, is that we keep the riffraff out, and that's why we're building this wall.
And they're building the wall too because it keeps the people who are building the wall busy so that they don't revolt against us. So
exactly.
it's like,
and it's all of this layers of nuance on this one song. And I had a conversation, and we didn't even hear a song yet, but I had a conversation a few years ago. I don't know if you recall, when when Pence was vice president and he went to see Hamilton, and they booed him. And then the cast made a comment at the end of the show. One of the members of the cast made a speech about how he appealing to the vice president to be kinder towards LGBTQ people and kinder to people of color, because he had a record as governor of not really doing the right thing. And there was a whole debate on whether that was appropriate. And I got into an argument with a friend of mine about how musicals are fun, and we don't go see musicals to be lectured and to be political. We go to musicals to get away from politics. And I was like, have you ever listened to the lyrics of any musical? Because I guarantee you, whenever that show was written, it is about some sort of political or social commentary. It is not just a song. It is saying something about your place in society, or the place the show was written in the time period, or it's just like art. When the art is created, it's saying something about that time period and the people who lived in that time period. And it's never in a vacuum of, oh, here is a song we wrote and that's it. There's always something more to it.
Yeah.
And
It's
for
just
people
more
to be,
acceptable when it's from the past, when it's in the values of, of the past. That they're like, oh yeah, that's fine.
And we go to the theater. We've gone to the theater all the way back into, when the Greeks were writing theater, it was all political and social commentary. That's why we went to the theater. And I always point to the fact that there's only one thing we know for sure about the Greeks, and all of that information we have is from the plays that were written thousands of years ago. If we didn't have those plays, we wouldn't know a lot about that political and social climate. And so if you think going to the theater isn't a social or political experiment every single time, even if you're going to see Phantom of the Opera or SpongeBob the Musical, you're wrong. There's definitely social and political undertones to every single show or play or TV show, movie, whatever you call it, art. It's always has some sort of underlying political tone or social
Yeah.
commentary. Sorry.
Yes.
I know I told you I'm going to talk a lot.
I know we haven't even picked a song yet. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be so good.
Yeah, I haven't
Okay.
even picked a song yet, but yeah, that's a great. Hadestown is awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Well, let me show you the songs. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the 5 songs, and
okay.
then whichever one feels juicy to you, and we could I might even just add the wall onto there because we could do that too. Okay, but anyway, whatever. Okay, all right. So we have "Prayer" from "Come From Away,"
Ooh,
and then we
how did you know that's a great choice?
well, I just love that musical, and it's a really powerful moment. Um, and it felt right.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Good.
I like that
Okay.
one.
I'm glad that I was like, that one, I was like, it was one of the other one's a little bit more popular, I guess. But that one I just thought was really juicy. So, well,
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
was picking them, I was like, okay, well, I was like, well, what do I know about Josh? Like, what is he like in the world? What's his energy? What is he like interested in? And so I was like, okay, well, and I was kind of like channeling you. I was like, okay, what do you think? What would I like to talk about with Josh? And so then I kind of tried to pick things that like were things I know that we might like to talk about.
Well, good choice. First
Okay.
one is like a home run, so that's good.
Sweet. Oh man. Okay. Uh okay. Next one is One Song Glory from Rent. Which I know you're a big
Nice.
Rent fan.
Yeah, yeah.
So Big, So Small from Dear Evan Hansen.
Okay.
Wait for It from Hamilton.
Of course.
And
As a
then
great, great
yeah,
song.
and then 3090 from Tick Tick Boom.
So you did a good job channeling me. I would say that's
Good.
pretty good. I mean, those are all in the playlist of Josh Kreitzman for currently.
Nice.
Um, I wish my wife was here. So Big, So Small.
This is a reminder.
When we saw Dear Evan Hansen um, on Broadway, my wife, when they did So Big, So Small, it was like my wife just like became a puddle in the
Oh yeah.
seat, and
Me too.
it was like unreal. Like, I mean, I cried throughout that whole show, but that one song, like if you have kids, forget it. Just that song will reduce you to
Yeah.
just like an entire ocean of tears.
Yeah.
And the
Same.
whole audience.
I
The funny
sobbed.
thing is, it's so quiet in that audience at that moment, and then all of a sudden, all you hear is
Yeah.
just like all these people like sobbing.
Yep. I was one of them.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's funny. So
Okay.
we'll start
So,
wherever you like. I mean, I have
yeah.
lots of opinions and lots of thoughts on all of those songs. We
Well,
could probably
you
do
get to
one
choose.
podcast
So,
on one of them. Oh, I get to choose.
you
Well, let's
get to
go
choose.
in order.
Pick.
We'll start with.
Well, we're only going to talk about one for the whole
Oh,
time.
we're only
So,
going to talk about
uh-huh.
one total
One song.
song.
Uh-huh.
Oh
The
my
whole
God,
time.
how do I choose?
I
That's
don't
not
know.
fair. All right, I'm gonna choose oh God, I don't even know what to choose. This isn't right. This is like asking me to choose like my favorite I could choose my favorite child. I could tell you which one of my children I like better. Then I could choose one of these songs. Oh man. I don't know what to do. All right, I'm just gonna do. Can I do this real quick? Because I don't know if this is against the rules. I'm just gonna say one thing about each of the songs, and then we'll pick one song to talk about the rest of the time.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay.
Do it.
So my thoughts on Prayer, Come From Away, the part where because the song starts where he goes to church, right? They go to the church and they're singing the Lord's. Is it the Lord's Prayer? I remember
It's
what
like a
prayer they're singing.
Saint Christopher or something or
Right.
other. Yeah.
But the part that got me, and I didn't know this when I was listening to the soundtrack. I'm driving in my car listening to the soundtrack, and we're going to see the show in like a month, and I'm listening to the soundtrack, and I'm listening to this part of the song, and they're singing the Saint Christopher, that prayer, and all of a sudden they go to the rabbi,
Yeah.
and I'm like getting like emotional just talking about this. But then they start singing the Kaddish song, no, for the in Hebrew, and then the Muslim character starts singing, and I'm like, and I'm in my car driving on the Long Island Expressway, and I'm like, tears are coming down my face, and I was just like, I'm not going to make it through the show. I'm not making it through the show.
Oh yeah.
So I'm crying now, just even like remembering what it was like. By the way,
Yeah.
Come From Away, it's an hour and a half. It's one of the best shows I've ever seen. I would say my
Agreed.
top five I've ever seen of all time.
Like I laughed and cried and laughed and cried and laughed and cried at the same time, and like
Yeah.
it was
So emotional.
so good.
It was I didn't know at first when they're like, oh, it's a show about 9/11 and what happened. And I'm like, why would I ever go see a musical about this? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
But honestly, it was the most uplifting experience that I've had in the theater. It was so amazingly moving. So Hamilton, wait for it. Okay. So the thing that bothers me that annoys me more than anything about Lin-Manuel Miranda and wait for it is the story of how he wrote the song. So he was on his way to his friend's house in Brooklyn, and he's sitting on on his subway, and he's all of a sudden he hears in his head, wait for it, wait for it, you know, wait for it, wait for it, and he hears the ding, 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 and he's like, oh my God, that's the song. And then he basically writes the whole. Can I curse on this thing? Will you prefer? And I don't have to. He writes the whole effing song on the subway to his friend's birthday party. And instead of going to his friend's birthday party, he walks around the block in Brooklyn and continues to write the song in his little tape recorder. And then he walks into his friend's birthday party and goes, hi, happy birthday. I just wrote the song in my musical that I've been waiting to write. I have to go now. I have to go back to my apartment and finish writing it. And then he leaves the birthday and goes and finishes writing the song. And it's like so frustrating to me as a musician or as somebody who has written songs that are mediocre at best, to have someone be like, oh yeah, I just kind of heard that on the subway. It came into my head and now I wrote it and it's in a musical and it's a great song. And I'm like, you know what, Lynn, I hate you. And that's not fair. It's not fair that someone should be so amazingly brilliant. And I'm sure this is what they felt like when Shakespeare was alive, but Lin-Manuel Miranda is a genius and I hate him for it. He's too talented. It's not fair and it's not right. So Big, So Small, I told you, Dear Evan Hansen, love that show. Really just the most emotional thing. I was going to take the kids. I'm so glad I didn't, because I would have been like really worried. That is like a show that hits you hard right in the gut.
Yeah.
And what was the other? There was One Song Glory and
One Song Glory and 3090 from Tick Tick Boom.
Okay. 3090, Tick Tick Boom. I never really listened to Tick Tick Boom, but I love Jonathan Larson. And then when Andrew Garfield did the movie on Netflix, 3090 is just brilliant. And I love that song. And I love the syncopation of that song. I love the way he wrote it. I love the references and just the fact that you can play and sing that at the same time is crazy. Like it doesn't seem like it's timed properly, but I love Tick Tick Boom. And again, same thing, Andrew Garfield, like how dare you be so good looking and be so talented, and I hate you for it. Every second of my day I watch that movie or think about that. And it's so moving, right? 3090, like that song really jacks you up.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you listen to that song and you're ready to run through a brick wall. And that's just the first song of the show. And you're like, oh man, I love that song. But let's talk about One Song Glory, because I have a huge connection to Rent. That show came out when I was 17, turning 18. And that was like, as crazy as it sounds, like of all the musicals. And now Rent's not my favorite. My favorite musical is the greatest musical of all time, which is West Side Story. We all know that's the greatest musical of all time. That's I don't think that's even a debate. But even though my kids seem to think that it's not, I don't know what's wrong with them. But West Side Story is the greatest musical of all time. And Sweeney Todd is also amazing. But Rent, and I'm sure Cindy, you can agree that Rent came along at a time for you and I when we were probably 16, 17, 18. And it was like hearing about AIDS every day, right? We were in school and all we heard of what Ryan White, right? Remember the Ryan White story?
Yeah.
You remember him?
That I hadn't thought of that name probably in 30 years or 20 years, however long. Yeah.
And it was like, you get blood transfusion, you can get AIDS, drugs, drug use, AIDS. And then Philadelphia had come out, the movie Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. And so like this was everywhere. And then I think it was 96 or 9. Yeah, it must have been 96.
Yeah, because I saw it for the first time in 98.
Okay. So I was in
Yeah.
like 1996. I don't even remember the first time I was told about it or heard about it. It must have been on the Tony Awards. They performed Seasons of Love. And that
Yeah, I
must
don't
have been the
know.
first time I had heard of it or seen it. And yeah, I wanted to be any part in that show.
Yeah.
I actually would have been any part. But One Song Glory, that song, like Adam Pascal, I didn't really think he had the best voice, but he was that part. Like that was him.
Yeah.
And
It makes me cry every single time I listen to it. It can't not make me cry. And well, even we toured here last year, and the Roger actor was not good. But
oh
it's hard,
no.
like when you've got Adam Pascal as the model who has that like grittiness and like beautiful smoothness at the same time in his voice. Like, how do you compete? But uh,
Yeah, I mean, I'm happen to be very lucky. I live in Long Island, which I'm like 40 minutes outside of New York City. I grew up going to see Broadway, and my parents had a friend who had a theater, and she would get $15 discount tickets to every show. So I saw a ton of stuff when I was growing up, and it was like every month we would go see a different show. It didn't even matter. I mean, I've seen Grand Hotel. Who's going to take a 13-year-old to see Grand Hotel? That show was awful. Now, it was not an awful show, but when I'm not for a 13-year-old, but it didn't matter
no,
because I just wanted to see a show.
yeah,
And when Rent came out, it was like mind blowing to me that these were me. This was like my people. And at 17 years old. So here's the cool story about Rent. Um, they did rush tickets. Was the first show I think to do rush tickets where you could buy $20 seats in the first two rows 2 hours before the show.
hmm.
But you had to wait online at the box office. And so people started going earlier and earlier because it was $20 seats to see a show that was selling tickets in the front row for like $100 a ticket. And they reserved the first two rows for $20, but you had to get there. And the first time I saw Rent, I got there at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I stood outside the box office from 4 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. And we got front row center for $40, me and a friend. And that was the first time I saw Rent. And literally, like, they did Seasons of Love, like
Oh shoot.
6 inches from my face. And I knew every word. So we're all, and everybody in the front two rows is like groupies. So we all know every word. And when he did, so One Song Glory. So he comes out and he starts playing that opening, and it was the original cast. So it was everyone. I mean, everybody you hear on the original cast recording. And man, it was like so exciting. And for a 17-year-old, for my parents to be like, yeah, go ahead, go 4 o'clock in the morning, go whatever. They were like, sure, sounds good.
Yeah.
But that became way popular. And so the next time I went and got tickets to Rent. We had to go the night before. And so we slept out on the street
Wow.
in New York City, 17-year-olds, me and like five of my friends sleeping on the street in New York City,
Get Rent tickets. Ugh.
for Rent tickets. And I'd seen Rent like before I went to college, because I was here, I went to college. Before I went to college, I had seen Rent like 5 times for $100
Oh man.
because it was $20 tickets. And I think what I paid to see Rent 5 times is what people paid to see it once,
Yeah.
And I remember one time Roger has this, like, at the second act, he has like this black and white shirt that's like this weird kind of funky shirt. I can't describe it. It's like an optical illusion. It's like
Yeah.
this white and black swirly shirt. And Roger would stand right in front of us wherever we got the tickets, like in Seasons of Love. And the person next to me, I didn't know, had this shirt on, the same shirt that the actor was wearing. And when he came to the front of the stage to sing Seasons of Love, this guy ripped his jacket off and he had the shirt on. And the guy, and it wasn't Adam Pascal that night. It was, I think it might have been even Norbert Leo Butz, but it might not have been. But he pointed at the shirt, and like in the middle of the song, he like almost leapt off the stage and he gave the guy a hug. And he like, it was like we were part of the show in that first 2 rows, you know.
Yeah.
We would sing along. It was like we had popcorn. We're like, oh, we're sharing popcorn with the actor. I mean, they knew they were really just performing for us, you know.
Yeah.
But Rent was like the meaningful show for us, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, One Song Glory was like, that was the anthem. That's
Yeah.
what we all wanted to be. All the guys wanted. I mean, if I were to be cast in the show, if I were to be cast in the show, it would be as Mark. I'm definitely not a Roger. But yeah, we all wanted to sing that song.
Well, I felt, I saw it when I was 17, 8. Yeah, I was a junior. It was my end of my junior year of high school. And I felt like at the time that I left that theater and I was like, I will never be the same again. Like I had that feeling like now life is different. and I felt the same. I did feel the same with Hamilton too. It was just like, that was like, and that's what good art does. It just fundamentally changes you. And it's funny because I was in London and I saw Les Mis the night before the night after Rent. And so we saw Les Mis that night and I was like, this is just awful because, how do you beat Rent to a 17-year-old?
Yeah. Well, Rent was like, that was our show. The coolest thing I thought, and I don't think the cast album does it justice. Like you have to see Rent live because like when you have the band there on stage, like jamming out and rocking out, like I thought the coolest thing ever was I don't remember which time it was, but the when they do the opening where it's just the tune up and they get to the part where he plays the and then the power blows, the band leader goes 5, 6, 7, 8, and then they go into the opening number, and it was like, oh my God, we were blown back like 100 feet. I mean, it was so amazingly loud and intense. And like you said, it was for us at 17 was like life-changing. It was like we've finally, Les Mis was like, and I like Les Mis, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
But that's like my parents' musical. Like that's like what my mom likes, Like,
yeah.
And so when I was telling my parents about Rent and they're like, oh, we like it. I'm like, yeah, but you don't get it.
You don't get
it. But I liked hair. I was a hippie. And I'm like, stop it, Mom. You don't really get it.
Indeed. Okay. So I think you commented on each one.
Sure.
So we're 30 minutes in now. Which one is the one?
Oh God.
Yeah, you have to pick.
I have to pick. So, all right. Oh God, I don't know what to do. Let's talk about Come From Away, because that was probably, of all of those that I've seen, I saw that one in person most recently.
Okay.
And
sweet.
we'll talk about that. And I also think Prayer is like the most nuanced of all of them. Like, of all, I don't know. Unless you want to talk about Hamilton, we could talk about Hamilton.
I could talk about any of them, but yeah.
I actually think Come From Away is, I loved Hamilton, and I thought Hamilton was amazing. But I think the problem with Hamilton is they charge you so much money to see it that it's like really hard to enjoy it because you're paying so much money. You're like, yes, I know this is amazing, but for $200 a ticket, it's like, it better be like the best thing. Like I better walk out of here like melted butter on toast, like, I better really love it. And Come From Away, I feel like,
okay.
I don't know.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we'll give, so the listeners who have not heard Come From Away, we'll give them a little synopsis of what it's about, and then place this song in what's happening in the musical, like the narrative. And then we can listen to the song. I don't want to play the song in the podcast because I don't want someone to sue me, but I will put the link to the song in the show notes. So when we get to that place where we're going to listen to the song, you can pause the podcast, go listen to the song. I have a YouTube video that is a performance of it, so you can see the actors and the stage. We have the staging and everything too. It's like, it's probably a bootleg, but
you mean a slime tutorial?
Yes. Okay. So You want to describe what Come From Away is about?
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief. I'm sorry, I talk a lot.
Oh, you're good.
So Come From Away is a musical about the city of Gander, which is in Newfoundland, Canada. And Gander used to be one of the largest airports in the world. In fact, it was the only stop between Europe and the United States where planes would refuel. But after jets and long-range jets came about, Gander, the airport, started to go into disrepair, and not many people would visit. And during September 11th, 2001, when the World Trade Center and the Pentagon was attacked, the FAA, for the first time ever, grounded all the flights in and out of the United States. And so there were all of these 747s and planes in the air that needed to go to ground immediately, but they were not allowed to land in U.S. airports because they were from foreign countries, or they were leaving, and so they needed to find the closest airport to land in, which happened to be the only airport that happened to be available to them was this airport in Gander, Newfoundland, Canada. And so 19 planes.
Yeah,
I think it was
so. It's like 7,000 people.
39 planes landed in Gander with how many people?
I think it was 7,000. Yeah, 7,000.
7,000 people, which basically tripled the size of the town, landed in this airport in Gander, and the entire town had to come together to basically feed, house, clothe all of these travelers from all over the world who spoke many different languages and had to deal with this crisis on their own for about 3 to 5 days before the planes could even start thinking about leaving when they opened up the airspace. And so the town bands together and cares for these people who are scared, who may have lost loved ones in September 11th attacks, who really don't know what's going on at all. And there was a lot of tension because there was a lot of fear and a lot of worry that this could happen again. Who did it? Why did they do this? How dare they do this? And there was a lot of fear and anger around that. And so this town and a few towns in that area come together, and they basically give all their homes and resources and everything they have to basically support these people. And that's what the show is about the love and support that this small town in Canada does for about 7,000 people. And then the epilogue, no, it's not spoiling anything. I mean, we all know that they left eventually, but 10 years later, they invited back people to memorialize or honor the town and in a monument, and they all came back and sing songs and have a good time. And
it was, yeah, it was just the most beautiful show, and each actor plays two parts. There's they play parts. Oh, 3 parts?
Yeah, yes. It's 13 actors and they play 39 parts.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And so there's, they're playing a Canadian, they're playing someone from the plane, there are probably multiple people from the plane. And what was remarkable is how I was able to, and I'm not good at that. I'm not good at listening to people's accents and understanding things, but like it was very, like the way they did it was very clear who was who. It was like one guy, he'd have a hat on, he'd take a hat off, he'd put a scarf on, he'd have a different accent. It was brilliant.
The best was the guy who was, there was one they were all amazing, but there was one guy who played like the bus driver. In Canada, the Canadian bus driver. He played the Egyptian chef, and he played one of the Kevins.
Yeah,
and he was talking as one of the bus drivers, and he turns around and he puts on a jacket, and his whole posture changes, and then he became the Egyptian chef with a totally different accent, and you could swear it was a whole other person.
Yeah,
and that was remarkable. How like just the posture change and the vocal change, like you really believe they were a totally different person, completely different.
Yeah. I didn't think I was going to be able to handle that because, I mean, Jesus Christ Superstar came last year, and we have a terrible theater in Dallas. The sound systems are awful. I didn't understand a word what that was said in the whole show. And I know the story of the Bible. I was like, I know this story. He gets crucified. You know, I was like, I know this, but I was like, I had no idea what was going on. So the minute they came on and they were talking so fast and they were talking in these accents, I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. But I just was immediately swept away, and I just followed the whole thing. There's no intermission, and it was so fast moving.
It's like watching them dance. Like that's what I realized, is that it was choreographed within like an inch of its life. You know, once that show starts, that it's like a train. I always imagine these shows like a train. And once the Come From Away train starts going down the track, that train ain't stopping.
Yeah.
And it's like this very articulate dance that they created between all of these scenes and movements.
Yeah.
And, you know, everything was choreographed within an inch of its life, and the actors were so spot on. And that's really, and there's really no set, right?
Yeah, it was just a bunch of chairs, a couple
chairs, a wall,
there were some tables. Yeah.
You know, when they did the planes, when they moved the chairs into position of a plane, you could swear they were sitting on a plane.
Yeah.
You knew it. They were on a plane. And then when they were in the bar, you knew they were in a bar. Like you, and I think that's the beauty of theater itself, is, and this is why live theater is always better than movies anyway, and even when you watch a musical in a movie, it doesn't really work. It's because when you go see live theater, the audience participates unwillingly. And when I say unwillingly, it's because you don't know as the audience that you're participating. Because when you go see Come From Away, you could swear you saw that plane that they were in with the wings and the fuselage and the color of it. You could describe it, but there was no plane there. We all created that in our heads. And that's how you get an audience into the story, because the audience becomes a character in the show. We help create it. And that's what makes live theater, in my opinion, the greatest American art form, because you're inviting the audience to participate with you. And it's, you know, I remember being in college, and one of my professors said, when you go see a show, you're an audience. When you're watching a movie or you're watching TV, you're a viewer. And there's a difference between the two words, because a viewer implies somebody who's watching from the outside looking in, and an audience is someone who is hearing it happen right in front of them in the present moment, and they're helping to create what's going on. And that's Come From Away forces you to, as the audience, to like help create the set. You're creating the gym that they end up living in, and the different places. And
you know what else it makes me think of, while you were talking about the audience versus the viewer thing, is that, you know, there's science that says like there are, I'm going to say this wrong, but there's like some sort of electrochemical something that happens when you're like in the same space with someone. Like your hearts are sending out like messages to each other. There's a book about this that someone told me about recently, but like being in the physical space and energy of a person too changes it. You see the physical actors, you're in their energy, you're in their space. And then what's fascinating about Come From Away is that you're with all of the other audience, and every single person in that room, as long as they were born, you know, after 2001, all lived this experience, and they all have a different story to tell. They all have an emotional connection to what happened that day. And so all of their stories are, and all of their emotions about those stories are present in the air around you. To where it's like, it's almost like you can almost feel it in the air, just like the level of like just connection between everybody there. And what was special when I went to, which is another side note, is my Come From Away tickets were March 2020. And that was one of the things that was immediately canceled. You know, it was like I was supposed to go the next weekend, and then it was rescheduled. And this was one of the first times we got to go back to live theater too. It was like, I think it was my first show after COVID. And then I'm like, I'm in physical space with people. And not only am like I'm sharing this like 9/11 memory, but also like we haven't been around people in all this time. So it was like that was there too. So it was like it was a trip. Like it was amazing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in that audience went into that show concerned, especially, I mean, I was in New York. We were in New York. I was my wife was in the city during 9/11. So I could tell you stories about that day. I could tell you stories about before, after. I have a ton of them. But just, I think when you see it in certain places with certain people, it's always that, are we really going to go on this journey? Like, do we want to do this together? Like,
Oh yeah.
is this something we want to do? Whereas you don't really get that feeling when you go to a movie or you watch a television show. When you see something live performed in front of you, it's present moment. And this show in particular really forces you to stay present, because there is no intermission. So there is no breathing. You don't get, and I think that's also part of the beauty of this show is you're very worried that it's going to be wallowing, like you're going to wallow in the sadness of 9/11. And the brilliance of the show is that you don't even have time. Like, they really do a good job of, you have the sad moments, you have the happy moments, but you don't have too much time to like really think about it. And it's really reminiscent of what it was like the day of 9/11, or even after, where nobody really had enough time to like process what we were really going through.
Yeah.
And it took months, years to kind of figure out how we all felt about it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that show really captures a lot of really good nuanced points of view that we can all relate to, and how we all felt, you know. I think we can all relate to some parts of the character, of each character. And the fact that it's played only by 12 or 13 people is like, we're all there, you know, we're all part of it. And, you know, the song that the pilot sings, the Me in the Sky.
Oh yeah.
Which he sings Me in the Sky. And the last thing is, you know, about how the plane was used as the bomb. That's like, it's jarring. I mean,
oh, I
it's
get
just,
chills. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's what it does to you. And then, you know, and the next song is the two of them, you know, walking along and looking at in the forest and overlooking the cliffs in Newfoundland and falling in love. Or, you know, I don't know, I just, you know, I'm from Long Island, so we call each other Islander. Like, we're Islanders. Like, my hockey team is the Islanders. So when they sing about being an Islander, like, you know, I know that. I know those people.
Oh, I hadn't.
We can at least understand each other.
Yeah. Yeah, those accents are amazing.
The accents they use are pretty hilarious. You know. But yeah, the scene, there's some great moments too. The scene where the guy like tells him to take the barbecue, and he's like, take the barbecue, and he's like, yeah, go ahead, just take it. He's like, that's it, I'm gonna get shot. You know, he's like, the guy from New York, like, I'm not taking anyone's barbecue. These people were so nice. And you know, it's a great story of like how we should be treating people. Again, you know, we started this talking about social and political commentary, and you know, there was a lot of blame and a lot of finger pointing going on, and it's really nice to see something about 9/11 that's not about that. That's really about, you know, how people can actually make differences and do the right thing. And, you know, in the moment, at the time, I mean, they basically took the clothes off their back and gave them to these strangers. And that's another, and also like one of the most poignant moments is the moment on the bus, right? Where they're on the bus and the couple from, I guess they're from, I don't think they tell you where they're from, but they don't speak English.
Yeah.
And
I know what moment you're talking about.
And they're worried because where they come from, when they get on buses, like it's the military, and they had right. So it's kind of like they describe, oh, we're all wearing our Elks uniform or Lions Club uniform. And so they're dressed up in these uniforms, but the people from a foreign country misinterpret that as the military is going to take us and
Yeah.
put us away. And then the guy pulls out the Bible and points, and it's like they connect over like the fact that they're both, they both read the Bible, right? So he points to his passage in the English Bible, his English version of the Bible, of like, don't be afraid. And then the guy takes out his version of his Bible that's in a different language, and he has the same passage. So he understands what the guy's trying to tell him. Like, don't be afraid. It will be okay.
Yeah.
And,
what a brilliant moment. Like I forgot about that moment. But there, and as you're talking, I'm remembering, because it's been a few years since I've seen it, and it's just all the little lessons in empathy and connection, and how do you support someone, how do you be there for someone, because like one of the characters, one of the Canadians and then one of the passengers both have sons who are firemen, and then one of them she hadn't heard from, and turns out he was one of the firemen on 9/11. And then so they were talking about their connecting over their fear of their sons being firemen as mothers, and able to be there for each other. I mean, just so much like beautiful human moments.
Right. It's a great human moment, and we all know someone who had a son or a daughter or someone. I mean, I knew a bunch of people, and that's what it was. It was like, they'll be fine, even though you knew it wasn't going to be fine.
Yeah.
It was, that's what made the show really hard to watch. Yeah. Because it was like, you're reliving the trauma of those days, especially, I mean, we lived like, I mean, we weren't living in the city at the time, but we worked in the city. When I say the city, I mean New York City. For those of you who are not from New York City, we refer to the New York City, as the city.
It is.
I don't know if anywhere else refers to their city as the city, but where I live, New York City is the city. So, but yeah, I mean, it was really tough, and I was actually when I went to listen to the show and then watched it, I was getting like flashbacks. Remember on like 10 days after 9/11, we were actually supposed to see Urinetown the day after.
I love Urinetown.
Yeah, it's a great show. We were supposed to see Urinetown the day after 9/11, and we actually called the box office. And this is how crazy New Yorkers are, just so everyone knows, if you didn't know how crazy New Yorkers were. So after 9/11, World Trade Center falls, we're pretty much going to war, like horrible, horrible things. And my wife and I have tickets to see Urinetown. And this is how crazy New Yorkers are, because we're not the only ones who would do this. We actually called up the box office, and we're like, so we're not sure, but are you guys performing tonight? Because we'll still come down to see the show if you're still performing. And they're like, yeah, no, we're not, because, the phones are still out and the problem, and because of the terror attack, we're not going to perform tonight. And we're like, oh, okay, well, just let us know what we need to do with our tickets. It was almost like, 9/11 happened, and then the next day it was like, okay, we got to get on with our lives. Like, let's go. We're going to go see a show, right? I mean, we
show
have
must
tickets.
go on.
Let's go. Get on the stage. Show must go on. So it's like typical New Yorker. And so if anybody thinks that those types of New Yorkers don't exist, yes, we're all over the place. We do exist. The day after 9/11 happened, we're like, all right, let's go. Time to get back to life.
Also,
yeah,
okay.
I mean, and then, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, let's move to the song. So the song is, they're doing a nationwide moment of silence. And then there's a man who is, I don't know the characters' names, but he's in a convenience store, and he noticed that everybody in the convenience store like stops and does the moment of silence at the same time, and he was amazed by that, that they did that. And then he talks about this prayer from his childhood that he really liked. I want to say Saint Christopher, but I'm not 100%. It's just in the video. And then then it kind of cuts to a church, which I mean, I guess I just assumed it was a church, but like you said, it was just chairs. And there's like kind of multiple rooms, and then there's some like Christians praying, and then rabbi comes in and sings his prayer, and then a Muslim man comes in and it says, he doesn't know, he needs to and wants to do his 5 daily prayers, but he senses the pressure on him, and everybody's eyes are on him, and everybody mistrusts him because Muslims are suddenly, very mistrusted, and he doesn't know what to do. But then someone comes and gives him a quiet space and says, you can go to this place to pray. And so he goes, and so then the Muslims are singing their prayers, and then all the prayers are being sung at the same time. So this would be a good moment to pause the podcast and listen to the video, which you will find in the show notes. So I think I will pause our recording, and then I will.
Sure.
So hopefully, listeners, you went and listened to that, or watched that, because it was amazing. And there were some things I left out. The whole man from Poland. I don't know what happened when I watched this earlier today, but that part, like, I must have been distracted by a dog or something. Okay, so tell me, what were your reactions there, seeing it again?
I mean, it's amazing to me how, like, we're so different, right? Again, bringing it back to what we had started talking here about social and political commentary.
Yeah.
We're also at odds. We're different. It's the Muslims this, the Jews that, the Christians that, the Hindus this, these people, those people, and like yet we all sing and pray for the same thing. And that's the part that hits me, is that it's like you realize that we're all in this together, not to be stupid and cheesy about it, but that's what that song is. It's a peace, it's a prayer for peace. We're all praying, and you feel, like, I don't know, at the time, I certainly didn't feel bad for Muslims. We were all rah, rah, USA, USA. But now looking back on that 22 years later, you're like, man, we were terrible to people. And there's a guilt factor. There's a realization that we were wrong. And, when we say we, I say me. But that song is beautiful, and it's placed right in like the dead center of the show. When all seems lost, right? People stop and they pray. Whether you pray to one God, 10 gods, no gods, you're always looking for something from the universe to bring you peace. And I love the part, I relate to the part with the rabbi and the guy from Poland, and because I'm Jewish, and it always reminded me, that one part always makes me think of the movie Independence Day, which is, you've seen that movie, right?
But probably in the 90s. I haven't seen it since.
Well, forever.
I don't remember.
But there's a part in the movie where, like, the aliens are attacking, and they're all going there. It's like the last moment when the aliens are going to basically destroy and wipe out humanity. And Jeff Goldblum's father is played by Judd Hirsch, who is a very famous actor. He's Jewish. And he sits down and he starts praying. And one of the people comes over and he says, can I pray with you? And he says, of course, come sit, pray with us. And he says, but I'm not Jewish. And Judd Hirsch looks at him and goes, nobody's perfect. And it's such a great moment, because it's like, does it even matter? Yeah. Does it even matter if you're not Jewish, Muslim? Does it matter? And no, the answer is it doesn't matter whether it's, a Christian prayer or a Hebrew prayer or a Muslim prayer or a Hindu or Buddhist or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. As long as you are hoping for something better. Yeah. That's like the message. And when they I was fine in that song until they started intertwining the Hebrew. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm out. I'm like, I can't. And that was like, I can't even get through this podcast without like tearing up. And I'm sorry to anybody who has to listen to me like try to not cry.
It's okay. We have had lots of tears in this podcast, and on my Facebook profile it says I make people cry for a living. So It's fine. I support it. I feel like job well done. If someone
Job well
cries.
done. You got me to cry. I'm like Cuba Gooding Jr. and Jerry Maguire. You got me to cry. Yeah, I mean, it's so moving, that moment, because it's like they all the characters realize the only way they're going to get out of this is together.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Egyptian character says, I feel them looking at me. They're staring at me. I know they're thinking bad thoughts about me, and I feel weird about praying, because what if I kneel to pray and they say, I'm the one who did this? It's my people that did this. And that's not fair. And, hearing that perspective from someone who is not Muslim is like heartbreaking, because I know what it's like to be scapegoated for things as a person who's Jewish, as a person who, I wasn't the most popular kid in high school. So, we all relate. And that moment is like amazing, because it really, it takes, so you have the first half of the show leads up to that. And then you have that moment, which could either be the highest or lowest moment in the show. And then it all kind of is like a roller coaster after that, because now it's like, okay, we've gotten to the crux of the meaning of this show. Yeah. Right. The message. And now it's like, how are we going to get home? So, and that song itself, when they all combine to sing, I mean, I'm sure someone can talk more about like the actual music that was written and that they sing it in a round, and but I could tell you that I know that the Hebrew prayer that they sing, Oseh Shalom, is about bringing peace. So I'm pretty, and I know we all hear, I could speak English, so I know what they're saying in English. I don't speak the other languages, but I'm pretty certain that the other languages, the other prayers would be something similar.
Yeah. Now I'm like, ooh, I can Google this. Prayer translation. I'm like, because I didn't notice it earlier either, because I kind of was watching to make sure the video was good, but I don't know that I fully gave it all my attention. But I noticed there were Hindu.
There's a bunch
prayers
of different prayers.
Okay, let's see what it says. No. Oh, wait, here it is. Oh, that's the Hebrew. Okay. Oh, no one. This is just some random citydata.com. They're having a conversation about "Come From Away." I love it.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay, I don't want to take too long for you. Just like listen to me Google, but I wanted to see if it says. Oh, I can just copy it and see what it says.
Go to ChatGPT. They know everything there.
Oh, yeah, they do. It's an Arabic prayer, and it means, God is great, glory to my Lord the most great, glory to my Lord the most high, praise to God. Okay. And then, do we have the Hindu?
Yeah, I'm going to look that up.
Oh, Hindu passengers. Yep, here we are. Thank you for your patience, listeners. I'm sure you're curious as well.
Yeah, I think it's like, from evil, lead me to good. From darkness, lead me to light. From death, lead me to immortality. From falsehood, lead me to truth. From darkness, lead me to light. That's the translation I'm getting. And then shalom.
Yeah, it's on the end. It says peace, peace, peace. It's like the last 3 words. Cool. Okay. So yeah, it's all like the same vibe, which we could tell by just the sound of it. But yeah, and me too, as someone who is not religious. I grew up religious, Catholic, but I'm not religious now. But it still, to me, was so, like, I saw myself represented in there too. Even the main character who comes out and he says, I don't go to church anymore, but he still like can connect with that connection with a higher power, connection with the peace that we're looking for. All of that, the messaging in that was, I think anybody could see themselves in there.
It's funny because I remember, like, just like he said, I doubt if we had this national moment of silence that anyone would observe it. And I remember being in New York, we had a national moment of silence. I don't really remember caring
Yeah.
enough to stop. And I was like, oh yeah, that was me. You know, I remember that. And, you know, it was hard to, I think it was also watching the show was cathartic for me in particular, because I have a lot of feelings around 9/11 in particular, because I was, you know, so close to it. And I mean, I wasn't physically there, but like just by virtue of being in the area,
Yeah.
just having my wife being down in the city at the same time, at, you know, having to try to get her back on the train, you know, to where we were lived was like impossible. No phones, no nothing. I mean, I had to call my grandmother in Florida just to get in touch with my wife to tell her how to get home, because the cell tower on top of the World Trade Center was destroyed.
Yeah.
And I also have a lot of guilt around 9/11 too, because at first we thought it was nothing. You know, like I was supposed to watch Regis and Kelly that morning because I was home, and it wasn't on. All I saw was this building on fire, and I'm like, okay, we get it. The World Trade Center got hit. The firefighters will take care of it. Like, I want to
Yeah.
watch Regis and Kelly. Let's go. Who cares? Like I
Yeah.
said, a lot of New Yorkers are like, oh my God, a plane hit a building. All right, well, planes hit buildings. What do you want? You know, I mean, that
Yeah.
happened. And then it turned out to be a lot more than that. And I think there's a huge trauma guilt factor around that, you know, that we didn't really take the time to actually care as much as we should have.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and it's interesting to hear that, because I'm like, well, of course, like you didn't know. But I even have like, there's a moment that I had that I still kind of feel guilty about, and it's like the smallest, most insignificant thing that happened is that day. I didn't even have a cell phone at this time. I was a freshman in college, and I was like late for class, and so I missed everything. But then like later that day, I had an internship at an art gallery, and I went to it because, you know, normal day. And I came in, and for a second they were like, "How are you?" I was like, "Oh, I'm good." And then like 5 seconds after that, I was just like, I just said I'm good. I was like, I'm not good. Like, what just like this thing just happened? It's like in that moment I forgot everything that had happened, and it was like, and
yeah,
then I felt for some reason so guilty about that for so long, that it was just like for that moment I just forgot when like such a horrible thing was happening. And then I forgot, and then I was, of course, worried that everybody there was judging me for saying I was good. You know, it's like
right.
the
And that's
things that
like
you,
this whole spiral about one little thing that happened. Not the 9/11, the little thing, but what you said,
yeah,
which
like
no one cared about really except for you.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, I remember, so this, we had just gotten married, and my wife Phyllis, we had gotten cell phones, and she never turned hers on. And so I'm calling her, telling her to just get back on the train and come home. And she's going about her day. She's got to go to Rite Aid. She got to go to, you know,
yeah,
Dwayne Reed. She went to the bank. She gets back to the office, and they're like, "Do you know what's going on?" She's like, "Yeah, plane hit a building, whatever, no big deal." And I'm trying to call her to tell her to come home. And by the time she turned the cell phone on and realized there was a big deal, you know, there was a bomb threat at Grand Central, and they closed the train station, and
oh,
she
the
couldn't make
train,
it home. And the real and you know, another thing that really moves is we do have a similar story, because she was in a mass of humanity. And yeah, I don't know if I should be telling anybody this, so I'll tell anyway. It's part of the story. My wife has anxiety. Like, to be in a group and sea of people is like really hard for her.
yeah,
And especially at a time like this, where now everyone's like nervous and worried that anything could happen. There was a bomb threat at Grand Central. She needs to get home, and she's in this mass of people outside of Grand Central Station on 42nd on Fifth Avenue. She doesn't know what's going on. This is her like third day on the job after we got married, and she's just lost. Like, what do I do? And it turns, she looks, she could probably tell the story better, and she sees a friend of ours in this mass of, I mean, this is New York City. It's
yeah.
hundreds of thousands of people, massive humanity. She sees someone she knows, gets to him, and they go to his girlfriend's apartment, which is 3 blocks away.
Oh, good.
And it's like amazing that that had happened. And then she came home. Eventually she got home. They opened the train station. She gets home and I screamed at her for not turning her. I said, that's why you have a cell phone. Turn on your cell phone. You got to keep it on at all times. You never know. This is why you have a cell phone. You think she learned that lesson? The next day, again, true New Yorkers, the next day she got up and she went to work. I get a call from her boss after she left saying, where's Phyllis? And I said, she went to work. She's like, there's no work. We're closed until further notice. And I'm like, oh, great. So I call her cell phone to tell her, no, don't get on the train. And guess what? Her cell phone is off again. So now, every time that my phone goes to voicemail, like every time I call my Phyllis and the phone goes to voicemail, I lose it on her because it's like all of that.
Yeah, it's like
trauma,
PTSD.
I'm relived with that PTSD of not being able to get in touch with her. And I'm like, this is why you have a cell phone. 2 days in a row after I yelled at her. So it's like watching Come From Away and hearing the songs and this thing. It's like making me relive all of this. And I'll say the craziest part about Come From Away, 9/11, all of this story is that it's true.
Yeah.
And it's the first. I remember what I said to my parents, which is, now I understand. When I was learning about Vietnam in school, in high school, my parents were like, we were there. My best friend's mother was at Kent State when those kids were shot. And we now have lived through a part of our kids' history books where it's like, they're going to learn about this in social studies and they're going to be like, oh, we learned about 9/11 today. And it's like, yeah, well, I have some stories that aren't in those history books.
Yeah.
Because I was there. I could tell you, and it's like really a huge turning point in our lives, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And, when your kids learn about it, when my kids learn about it, you're going to be like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what I was doing on that, on that day. I could tell you everything that happened on that day.
Yeah.
And I think that song in particular brings up a lot of that trauma, PTSD, and hope, and the wish of what we would want us to be if everything were perfect.
So you said it, that it kind of brings up reliving it and like reliving the trauma and all of that. Do you find, or did you find when you saw it, that the musical had a healing component for you too?
Absolutely. I felt like it was like closure almost,
Mm.
where it was like, it gave me a whole other perspective on other people's experience on that day and what happened afterward. And the fact that, the story is not just about this town. It's about all of us. It's about all of us going through this global event as a humanity, and how terrible and life-changing it was. And, how we all were one way at 8:00 in the morning on September 11th, we were one way. And then by 11 a.m. that same day, we were completely different.
Yeah.
And I think the show really helps close that gap of what happened during and after, and that it wasn't all horrible. Even though it's a horrible event, that things that came out of it, friendships and families and broken families and lives that were ended and lives that were created. And you realize that, I think this is what I get from it, is that it's not all good and it's not all bad, and nothing's all good and nothing's all bad. And bad things happen, but good things can come from bad things happening. And that doesn't make them subject to bittersweet moments. Right. And I think that's, for me, the lesson is that, just because it was a bad thing that happened doesn't mean that good things can't come from it. And for me, it's like, it's important to remember that, just because something bad happens to you in your life and anything, or something doesn't go your way, you fail, doesn't necessarily mean that something that has to always be that bad moment. I mean, I've had things happen to me in my life. I've failed multiple times where after years I look back and are like, well, if I didn't have that happen to me, I'd never be the person I am today. And so,
yeah, I have those same things. It's like, it was terrible at the time, but it was something more beautiful came out of it, something that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yeah. And I think that it's easy to relate to the show because it has these archetypes in there, Think about the couple that met and got married because of this, right? I mean, it's definitely a lesson. It's definitely lessons learned or lessons to think about, while watching something that's just quote unquote entertainment.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I feel like we probably could keep going for another 45 minutes, but we've already been going on for over an hour. So I think we probably should stop. But I have this whole thing where I'm just like, a lot of what you've been saying has reminded me of like what has happened with COVID and like the feeling of like togetherness we felt at the beginning. So like, there's this whole other type of conversation. I'm like, oh, there's a connection, but I'm not gonna do it. We're gonna wrap it up. I was like, you can always come back and we can always talk about another musical if you're interested.
You got it.
So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. This was a delight.
Yeah, it was a blast. So thank you so much for, I'm glad you posted this and I'm glad I responded and I'm glad we got to do this because I don't really get to talk about theater art on a podcast. So
yeah, it's not something someone typically does. So amazing. Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure that like do you have any sort of like public social media that people could like follow you on, or are you just kind of?
You can find me on Instagram. I think I'm Joshua Kreitzman on Instagram. I'm on TikTok as Vanilla Josh.
Okay.
I may post something fun or every once in a while. My kids are awesome. So they do really creative stuff that I'll put up on Facebook of theirs, but I don't know. Yeah. I just kind of like hang out and I lurk, I guess is the term the kids use today. Yeah.
Awesome. Sweet. Okay. All right. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was good to see you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to Art and Self. And if you loved what you heard, please consider leaving me a rating or a review on iTunes. And share this episode with one friend who you know needs to hear what we talked about today. You will find links to the artworks that we discuss over at the show notes at artandself.com. And you can also join my email list to get notified of all of the new upcoming episodes. The videos of these episodes are also available over on YouTube at Art and Self. And you can also follow me on social media on Instagram at Art and Self and on Facebook at Art and Self Cindy. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful week. I'll see you next time.